My name is Lydia Hartwell, and I'm 32 years old. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Boston penthouse, watching a tugboat stitch a seam across the harbor, when my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We're keeping Thanksgiving small this year. Just Victoria, Brandon, and the kids. Hope you understand. Love you. For 3 seconds, I stared at the message. For 3 more, I let the old script spool up, the one where I shrink to fit the smallest chair at the table, the one where I say, no worries, to make everyone else comfortable. Then I typed, have a good time. I placed the phone face down on the marble countertop, the ocean light cutting my reflection into pale ribbons, and listened to the quiet hum of my own life. I could have called. I could have asked why. But I already knew why. In our family, small meant without me. People assume being second born means simply being second. In our house, it meant invisible. When I was 12, I brought home second place in a regional robotics competition. I stood in the kitchen holding a plastic trophy that felt heavy for what it was. Mom barely looked up from her tablet. That's nice, sweetie. Then she turned to my dad. Did you see? Victoria made varsity cheer as a sophomore. Coach says she's the best athlete they've had in years. Dad's chair scraped back. He was already reaching for his phone to call everyone he knew. I carried my trophy upstairs and set it on my shelf. Nobody asked about it again. At 15, I taught myself Python and built a janky program to sort a decade of family photos by date and face. I thought Dad, an accountant with a secret love for order, would light up. He glanced at my code like it was a grocery receipt. That's good, Lydia. Hey, did you hear? Victoria's been nominated for homecoming court. I remember nodding because nodding was easier than breaking. When I got into Stanford, computer science, partial scholarship, Mom said, California is far, and Dad said, if that's what you want, and that was the toast. No cake, no family dinner. Victoria looked up from her phone, said, cool, then went back to texting. The next week, they drove 3 hours for a cheer showcase. I moved to Palo Alto and became a ghost who learned to run on caffeine and silence. During sophomore year, Victoria married Brandon in a champagne-colored fairy tale with 10 bridesmaids. I wasn't one of them. I ended up in the kitchen, bussing plates with the caterers because at least there the work made sense. The years after Stanford blurred. 2 jobs I outgrew as soon as I learned where the copy machine lived. At 26, I gambled on my first startup. 16 months later, it died in a tiny San Jose apartment that could barely hold a twin mattress and my shame. I phoned home, hoping my father's voice would be a rope. He sighed. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, Lydia. Find something stable. Mom added, look at Victoria. She's thriving at Goldman. Maybe ask her how to be realistic. I said I'd call them later and didn't. But failure is a language, and if you stay with it long enough, it starts to translate the world. I learned how to build quietly and burn slowly. At 29, I launched Aegis Lock, a cybersecurity firm that was either brilliantly timed or, more likely, the product of sleeping on my keyboard and eating noodles that came in crinkly, suspiciously cheerful packages. 3 months in, with less than 2 weeks of runway, I called Dad again, one last time. A small loan, I said. I'll pay it back with interest. He said, business clearly isn't your thing, and then told me, full of warmth, that Victoria had just made vice president. I hung up and promised myself I would never dial home to ask permission to exist again. Sometimes the market yawns open like a mouth exactly the size of your dream. Contracts landed. 1 client became 5. 5 became federal agencies and global banks. By year 2, we were 95 employees across Boston, Denver, and Seattle. Our software standing watch over millions of users' logins like an insomniac saint. When a conglomerate came sniffing, I hired very expensive people to translate sniffing into numbers. 5 months later, I signed the sale. $320 million. I walked home through a city that didn't know my name, laid on my couch, and laughed until my chest hurt. I bought the penthouse because Boston Harbor has a way of telling you whether you're honest with yourself. Then I started looking west. When I found the Colorado estate, stone, timber, glass, a guest house tucked into 60 acres, I felt the same thing I felt the day I wrote my first working authentication script. Something clicked into place. $6.5 million. And another million in renovations later, the house became the map of a life I could invite people into. I told almost no one. In my family, privacy was survival. Good News had a way of turning into a performance where I played the assistant stagehand. On the deck, October sun softened by the mountains, I pictured Thanksgiving. I imagined my parents' faces softening in the foyer, imagined my father's hand brushing a banister he'd wordlessly adore, imagined my mother's eyebrows climbing, in a way that meant she was proud even if she didn't have the language. Then Mom's text arrived, the small one, and something deep inside me stopped hoping for firsts and began building seconds. I called Uncle Thomas. "What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" "Your parents said they're keeping it small," he said. "We weren't invited." "Come to Colorado," I said. "I bought a place." He laughed, then realized I wasn't joking. "We'd be honored." I called Aunt Patricia, Aunt Diane, cousins, second cousins, family friends who'd eaten dry turkey with us for 2 decades and smiled through it. 27 calls. 27 people had been cut because they weren't impressive enough for my sister's in-laws. I invited all of them. 42 guests said yes, as if yes were the only word that made sense. I hired Antonio, a chef whose resume made me nervous to read. I booked first-class flights, lined up SUVs from Denver to the Valley, reserved extra rooms at a quiet luxury hotel down the road. I walked the guest house, placing gifts that proved I saw the people who'd always seen me. A vintage scarf for Aunt Patricia, a top-shelf driver for Uncle Thomas, science kits for the cousins' kids. I told David, my property manager, that the flowers in every room should look like joy that had been arranged by someone with taste and restraint. "Are you telling your parents, Foy?" he asked gently. "No," I said. "They told me their plan. I'm telling mine." That night, as the calendar tilted toward the holiday, my boyfriend Evan came in from a call and leaned against the doorframe, studying me like a puzzle he wanted to solve for the right reasons. He's an ER physician. Steadiness disguised as rush. "Are you sure you don't want to invite them?" he asked. "They uninvited me," I said. "I'm just obeying the rules they made." He nodded, then crossed the room and wrapped his hands around mine. "You're not obeying anything. You're choosing." He kissed my forehead. "Text me the final guest list. I'll handle arrivals." As he turned to leave, he hesitated. "One flag," he said. Sienna texted me. I scoffed before I could stop myself. Sienna, the ex-girlfriend who still orbited any room that smelled like money or proximity. What did she want? "She's in Denver, coincidentally," he said, expression careful. "She's friends with one of Brandon's cousins." "Of course she is," I said. "Let her orbit. There's nothing here for her to bump into." But after he left, I stood by the windows again and watched the tugboat drag its dark seam across the water, and I felt it, that slight electric tremor in the air when a storm is far away but walking toward you. I picked up my phone and scrolled the guest list until names became a chant. Family that stayed when staying wasn't fashionable. Friends from Stanford who answered my calls when the startup died and I was smaller than my own outline. Former employees who'd taken a chance on my improbable ship. Thanksgiving morning was coming. 42 yeses climbing into airplanes and cars. 42 sets of eyes ready to see me, exactly as I was. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was done curating my own absence. I sent one last text to Grandma Dorothy. No pressure, no expectations. I'm hosting Thanksgiving in Colorado. I'd love you to come if you feel up to a trip. I set the phone down and listened to the house breathe around me. Timber, stone, glass, a heart rebuilt. On the counter, the screen lit. A single bubble. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Don't tell your mother. I smiled, then opened the front door to the cold, clean dark. The valley held its breath the way the stage does, one heartbeat before the curtain lifts. Thanksgiving morning rose blue and brittle, the kind of Colorado cold that feels like the air has been rinsed in glass. Antonio was already in the kitchen when I came down. Sleeves rolled, knives whispering through herbs, the citrus and sage telling the house to wake up nice. "Timing is a choreography," he said without looking up. "Trust me, we'll waltz." David checked arrivals from a tablet like a flight controller. First SUV at 8:55. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Sarah are early birds. I walked the rooms, touching linen, straightening a scarf on a bed, recentering a bowl of clementines no one would eat. That ritual soothed the part of me that used to pass through my parents' doorway unseen and make my own bed twice, just to feel the day obey me. At 8:53, tires crunched in the drive. I went to the door and stepped into a morning so bright it blued the edges of everything. The SUV door opened, and Uncle Thomas climbed out, blinking like the view had reached out and smacked him. Mountain light on his glasses, his hand braced on the door as if the earth might pitch beneath him. "This is yours?" he said, half laughing, half praying. "All mine." He hugged me so hard my ribs protested. Aunt Sarah pressed her fingers to her lips, tears bright as the frost. "Your parents have no idea," she whispered. Not accusation, just awe filtered through grief. "Come see," I said, and the tour began. The foyer took their breath. The great room gave it back. The fireplace was stacked and ready. The library smelled like cedar and long attention. In the guest house, Aunt Sarah floated a hand over the scarf I'd placed on the bed. "How did you—" "You once told me you collect them," I said, "at Grandma's 81st, while you were refolding her napkins." Her eyes went damp. It is a strange and holy thing to be seen in such small, exact ways. By 10, the drive had turned into a soft parade. The cousins' kids spilled out like marbles and then scattered straight for the trail markers I'd tied with red ribbon. In the kitchen, Antonio's team moved with quiet speed. In the dining room, David's wife threaded greenery through the candlesticks like she was braiding a story into the table. I hugged, laughed, directed, watched. Every so often, I stepped near a window and let the white-blue morning pull my thoughts tight until my stomach unclenched. At 11:15, another car hissed to a stop. The door opened, and Grandma Dorothy stepped out in a quilted jacket the color of raspberries, chin lifted, the way she always carried herself when her joints argued. I practically ran. "You didn't tell them," she said into my hair, voice warm and wicked. "Good girl." "Did you fly alone?" "I made a gate agent my granddaughter for a day," she said. She was happy to have a grandmother. We both won. I looped my arm through hers and brought her inside to applause that started without anyone deciding to start it. Someone, the photographer, caught the moment. Grandma's palm on my cheek, my eyes and hers mirroring the same shine. Later, it would be the picture people said made them cry. By noon, the house had discovered its frequency. Kids played tag between the colonnades of timber. In the den, Uncle Thomas and a former Aegis lock engineer, Miles, argued cheerfully about the ethics of AI over a cheese board. Aunt Diane told a trio of family friends the story of the time my grandfather set a turkey on fire and blamed it on a malfunctioning bird. The photographer moved like a courteous ghost through it all. My phone pinged in my pocket, the sound swallowed by conversation. I glanced. Evan. "All shuttles landed on time. I'll be there by 12:30. One more patient to discharge." A second message, a beat later. "Heads up. Sienna liked Aunt Patricia's photo of your entryway." And Brandon's cousin Mark commented, "Stunning. Looks expensive." He added a ... that meant, "I'm watching the perimeter, but the perimeter is emotional, so brace." I slid the phone away. Let them watch. We weren't hiding. At 2, the tables were set as if a magazine had dreamed them, and then decided, fine, these people are worth it after all. 2 long planks of oak, the plates a quiet cream, the glassware thin enough to sing if you tempted it. Antonio came out to a murmur that honored his craft. He lifted 2 silver domes with a small flourish that someone near the end of the table actually clapped for. The room smelled like everything we were promised and seldom received: abundance, patience, a place where you can put your elbows on the table because the people at this table are your people. I stood, glass in hand, and the room fell into one of those sudden hushes that feels like snow about to start. "Thank you for coming," I said, and had to swallow because my voice landed lower in my chest than usual. Today I wanted to be with the people who always made room for me, even when the room I grew up in didn't. A ripple of laughter, soft and knowing. Eat, talk, take seconds without apology. We were about to drink when a taxi door thunked outside. Heads turned as if a conductor had lifted a baton. I went to the window and saw the top of a driver's cap disappear. Then a figure on the walk, small, determined, carrying a tote bag, like she'd packed her own weather. Grandma Dorothy snorted. She made it, she said, and when I opened the door, she swept past me to kiss the woman's cheeks. You old fox, Grandma scolded, delighted. You told your daughter you were sick. I was sick, the woman said, eyes winking. Sick of her nonsense. It was Grandma's bridge partner, Marlene, honorary aunt by sheer persistence and kindness. Everyone cheered. The house widened to let her in. Lunch blurred into afternoon. Plates emptied and reappeared. Someone put on Nina Simone at a volume that made the rooms sway without drowning the stories inside them. We went around the table, each person naming a gratitude. When it came to Grandma, she didn't stand. She had already earned the right not to, but her voice traveled the whole table easily. I'm thankful for people who refuse to keep walking down a hallway where the doors never open, she said, looking at me. People who build their own house and then leave the door unlocked for those who deserve to come in. I couldn't look directly at her. The photographer did. Another photo I would keep where I could touch it. Sometime around 4, the sun lay down early because mountains steal day like magicians. Groups wandered, some to the fire pit, some to the trail that looped and returned like a forgiving thought. In the living room, I settled Grandma with a blanket and sat beside her. We watched the blue arrive in layers. My phone buzzed again. Small seismic readings. Aunt Patricia had posted a carousel. Candlesticks, the window view, a candid of me laughing, head tipped back, unpracticed. Comments stacked like cordwood. Best Thanksgiving ever. Lydia's Colorado estate is a dream. Wait, Lydia? That Lydia. Proud of you, kiddo, from a former Aegis Lock intern. Wow. Wealth flaunt much? From Mark, predictably. Beneath the pile, a like from Sienna. Then a comment. Looks curated. The ellipsis was a smirk. I felt heat crawl my neck and then cool, fast. Evan slid in beside me, hospital ID still clipped to his pocket. I saw it, he said. Do you want me to? No, I said. Let it sit. People reveal themselves if you give them space. He squeezed my knee, then got up to carry a platter to Antonio without being asked. That, more than any comment online, is how a person tells you who they are. By early evening, the photographer had moved outside, capturing the house lit from within like a lantern. Inside, clusters of us played cards and told the versions of family stories where the edges have been sanded, but the truth still shines. Every so often, I'd glance at my phone. More photos, more hearts. A private message from Victoria. Beautiful house. Mom and Dad are in shock. I let it be. Some messages needed the night to cool before you touched them. Later, when the last pie plate had been defended and finally surrendered, we drifted to the den's broad couch. Evan poured wine. Miles set another log. Grandma fell asleep mid-sentence, mouth soft, hand still wrapped around mine. Antonio leaned in the doorway, watching the room he had fed. You built something that holds, he said quietly, as if commenting on a bridge. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The house answered for me in the language of weight and warmth and the music of people who had chosen to be here. My phone lit one more time, a number I knew by the ache it pulled through me. Mom. I didn't pick up. It rang again, then stopped. A minute later, a text. Why are there photos of your grandmother at a mansion in Colorado? Where are you? What is going on? I looked at Evan. He raised his brows. Do you want to? Tomorrow, I said. I'll talk to them tomorrow. I turned the screen face down and watched the fire burn in tidy golden sentences. Somewhere across the country, in a house that had never found a way to see me, a phone glowed over a kitchen counter. Here, in a home I had made from stubbornness and code, and a girlhood spent learning to love the quiet, 42 people slept full and warm under a roof that had enough room for all our names. Outside, the mountains made their tall promises in the dark. Inside, my life said, remember this. The next morning, the air outside was thin and clean. Snow dusting the peaks, sun slicing through clouds, like it meant to apologize for being late. I was sitting on the deck with a mug of coffee when my phone started vibrating. Once, twice, then again. It was my mother. For a moment, I thought about letting it ring itself into silence again. But the part of me that still wanted to be heard, the 12-year-old who'd carried a trophy into the kitchen, picked up. Lydia. Her voice was high, breathless. Why are there photos of you at some mansion in Colorado with your grandmother? She told us she was sick. She was, I said, sick of pretending. Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear her trying to decide if she should be angry or embarrassed. Your father and I deserve an explanation, she said finally. I had Thanksgiving with the family who wasn't invited. What does that mean? You said you were keeping it small, just Victoria's family, so I invited everyone else you uninvited. A pause, then her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Lydia, where did you get the money for a place like that? I sold my company last year. Another silence, then a clatter, her dropping the phone probably. My father's voice filtered through faintly. What's going on? When he took the phone, his tone had the sharp edge of someone losing control of the narrative. $300 million? He barked. 320, I corrected softly. You might have known if you'd asked how work was going last year. Are you trying to make a spectacle out of us? He demanded. I didn't post anything, I said. Your daughter's friends did. I just fed my guests. You made us look terrible, he snapped. You humiliated this family. No, Dad, I said. You did that when you decided half your family wasn't impressive enough for Thanksgiving. In the background, I heard my sister's voice, sharp and clear as breaking glass. Lydia, do you realize how this looks? Everyone's comparing our Thanksgivings. Ours looks pathetic now. That's not my problem, I said. And then, put them on speaker, a third voice cut in. Grandma Dorothy. I didn't even argue. I hit the button. Mom, Dad, she said. Mother, my father began, defensive. Don't start, she said, her voice steady as a hand on a table. You've taken that girl for granted her entire life, always making her the afterthought to Victoria's headline act. You think I didn't notice? Well, that's why I'm here in Colorado and not with you. Mom, that's unfair. No, Grandma interrupted. What's unfair is raising two daughters and teaching one that love has to be earned. Lydia built something incredible through her own work. You should be proud, not angry. Mom's voice cracked. We are proud. No, you're embarrassed, Grandma said, and you should be. The line went quiet except for breathing. 3 generations hanging on the same invisible thread. Then Grandma looked at me, eyes bright and fierce. Hang up, sweetheart. Let them sit with it. I did. The house felt impossibly still afterward. I wandered back inside and found Evan in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, helping Antonio pack leftovers into neat containers. How did it go? He asked, glancing up. I laughed once, the sound sharp. You ever watch a storm collapse under its own weight? He set down a tray and crossed to me, brushing his thumb across my cheek. You okay? I think so, I said. It's weird. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just feel finished. Evan nodded. Closure doesn't always come with fireworks. I leaned into his shoulder. I just hope they heard Grandma. She's impossible to ignore, he said. Then, hesitating. Speaking of impossible. He pulled his phone from his pocket and showed me the screen. There it was. A social post from Sienna, his ex. A photo from Aunt Patricia's feed, reposted with a caption that read, Some people buy attention when they can't earn affection. Hashtag curated lives. I exhaled slowly. She's really that desperate? She's jealous, he said. And bored. I can handle family drama, I murmured. Internet rumors are just background noise. But I felt it. A cold pulse of irritation sliding under my skin. I didn't want this day, this joy, to turn into another performance piece for the people who'd never cared enough to show up. Later that afternoon, Grandma shuffled into the great room, wrapped in a cream shawl, and sat across from me by the fireplace. You did the right thing, she said simply. I don't know, I said. It feels petty. No, she said, eyes narrowing. You were honest. Petty is wanting revenge. Honest is refusing to hide anymore. The fire snapped. I looked down at my hands. They'll never understand. Maybe not, she said, but that's not your work to do anymore. That night, the mountain air grew sharp enough to bite. Most guests had retired to the guest house or hotel. The few who stayed lingered in the den. Miles telling Grandma a story about sleeping through an earthquake. Evan quietly topping off glasses of mulled wine. The warmth in the room felt almost fragile, like a candle cupped in palms. Grandma leaned close. You know they'll call again. I know. And you're going to answer, she said, not as a question. Yes, I said after a beat. Eventually. She nodded once, satisfied. Good. Don't let silence become another kind of war. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Text this time, not calls. Victoria, I've been jealous of you for years. You got to build your own life. I was too scared to disappoint them. I'm sorry. Dad, we were unfair. I'm proud of what you've done. Mom, The house is beautiful in the photos. Can we come see it sometime? I stared at the messages for a long time, thumb hovering. Evan came up behind me, reading over my shoulder. Well, he said softly, that's something. Yeah, I said, it's a start. I typed back one message to all three. Come for Christmas. Just you, Dad, and Victoria. Small group. Send. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The sky over the valley had that quiet, polished blue that means change is coming. Beside me, Grandma smiled without looking up from her tea. Make them work for it, she said. I will, I promised. And for the first time in years, I actually meant it. The first snow came early that December, soft as sifted sugar. By the time my parents' taxi pulled up the long drive, the pines wore white shawls, and the roofline looked carved from icing. I watched from the window as three silhouettes stepped out, Dad in his heavy coat, Mom clutching her purse like armor, and Victoria trailing behind, face half hidden by a wool scarf. I didn't go out to greet them right away. I let them stand there for a minute, just looking. For the first time in their lives, they were seeing me without filters, without comparison. When I finally opened the door, the warmth from inside spilled out and wrapped around all of us. Dad blinked up at the stone archway. Lydia, this is incredible, he said. You really built this? I did. He nodded slowly, almost reverently. It's beautiful. Mom stepped inside, running her hand over the carved banister, as if touching it could make the reality sink in. You designed all this? Mostly, I said. The architect helped with the bones. I took care of the heart. Their eyes darted everywhere, at the vaulted ceilings, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the photographs of mountains at dusk. But when they reached the framed Forbes 30 under 30 cover on the study wall, Dad stopped dead. You never told us, he said quietly. I tried, I replied, last Christmas, but you were helping Ethan with his science project. He didn't argue. He just looked down, the kind of look people wear when a truth finally gets through. Dinner that night was quieter than any family meal we'd ever had. No shouting across the table, no small humiliations disguised as jokes. Antonio had insisted on cooking again, volunteering for the redemption arc, as he put it. The smell of roasted rosemary chicken and baked apples filled the house. We sat at the same long oak table that had once held 42 guests, now only 5 of us. It felt strange, almost too still, but not uncomfortable. Halfway through the meal, Mom put her fork down. Her hands were trembling slightly. Lydia, she said, your father and I owe you an apology. To be honest, I don't even know where to start. Dad nodded, his voice low. We failed you. We put too much pressure on Victoria to be perfect, and too little faith in you. We thought keeping peace meant keeping things the same. We were wrong. I studied their faces. Mom's lipstick had faded. Dad's eyes were red around the edges. They looked older, human. Victoria cleared her throat. I was awful too, she said. I wanted to believe they loved me more because it made me feel safe, but I think I always knew it hurt you. I'm sorry, Lydia. I really am. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the snow brushing against the window. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally, but this can't just be about guilt. It has to be about change. Mom nodded. Then we'll change, starting with listening. Later, while the others went to the guest rooms, I found Evan out on the deck, phone in hand, snow gathering in his hair. He'd flown in that morning after another double shift and barely had time to breathe. You survived dinner, he said with a grin. Barely. He turned his screen toward me. Thought you'd want to see this. It was Sienna again, another post, another performance. A close-up of her hand holding champagne, captioned, Some people celebrate too loudly when they finally matter. I rolled my eyes. She's obsessed. She's insecure, he said. She still wants my attention, but I blocked her after Thanksgiving. I thought you should know. I smiled. Thanks for handling it. He stepped closer, brushing a bit of snow from my sleeve. You've built something real here. Don't let noise from people like her, or your parents, drown it out. I exhaled. I'm trying, but part of me still expects someone to tell me I don't belong. He took my hand. Then I'll be here to remind you that you do. The next day, we all went hiking through the back trails behind the property. Dad struggled a bit with the incline. Mom kept stopping to take photos of every pine cone. And Victoria walked beside me in a kind of tentative peace. You know, she said quietly, I used to think you were lucky because you got freedom. No expectations, no spotlight. But now I see it came with a price. Yeah, I said. Freedom's only fun if you don't have to fight for it. She nodded. I hope we can be sisters again, not competitors. I looked at her, really looked at her, hair windblown, cheeks red from cold, not the flawless girl who'd once had everything handed to her, but a woman finally learning humility. I'd like that too. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I found Grandma Dorothy's note tucked under the sugar bowl in the kitchen. Make them work for it, sweetheart. Not out of punishment, but so they learn the value of what they almost lost. I folded it and slipped it into my journal. Outside, the snow kept falling. Soft, endless, forgiving. The next morning, the house felt different. Lighter. Mom made pancakes, laughing when the batter splattered across the stove. Dad fixed a loose cabinet handle just because he could. Victoria sat on the floor, helping me wrap gifts for the local shelter's donation drive. It wasn't perfect, but it was something that felt close to peace. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Evan came up behind me and whispered, "They didn't ask for anything, did they?" "No," I said, surprised by how much that mattered. "Not a thing." He smiled. "Then maybe they came for the right reasons." I wanted to believe him. For the first time, I almost did. Christmas morning arrived under a pale gold sunrise, the kind that made every window pane in the house shimmer like sugar glass. The smell of cinnamon and pine drifted through the air. The world outside was a watercolor of white and quiet. I padded downstairs in slippers and found Mom in the kitchen, humming softly while arranging croissants on a tray. She looked up when she saw me and smiled, a real unguarded smile that reached her eyes. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she said. The word sweetheart landed differently this time. Lighter, less practiced. "Merry Christmas," I replied. Dad was by the fireplace, adding another log. Victoria sat cross-legged on the rug, wrapping the last few gifts with careful precision. Evan handed me a mug of coffee, his other hand brushing mine as if to say, "You made it this far." After breakfast, we gathered in the living room. The tree glittered in the corner, its ornaments catching the light like tiny captured stars. We took turns opening gifts. From my parents, a box of first edition books by my favorite authors, Jane Austen, Mary Oliver, Joan Didion, wrapped in tissue as delicate as their apology. From Mom, an extra parcel, 2 small paintings of Colorado landscapes from a local artist. "I researched her work myself," she said shyly. "Thought they'd fit here." From Victoria, a painting of the San Francisco skyline at dusk. "Remember you told me once you missed that view from your dorm?" she said. "I found an artist who painted it from memory." I didn't realize how hard it would hit until I was blinking back tears. "It's perfect," I whispered. Their gifts weren't about price tags. They were about attention, about finally seeing. Later, as the snow started again, we bundled up and walked the trails behind the estate. For once, no one was rushing, no one comparing. Mom stopped to marvel at icicles hanging from the trees. Dad laughed at himself for slipping on the ice. Victoria kept pointing out the shapes she saw in the drifts. "That one looks like a seal. That one's totally a heart." For a moment, we were just a family. Not the perfect one my parents used to stage, but a real one, messy and thawing. When we returned, Evan had a fire going. Grandma Dorothy had mailed a package addressed to the Hartwells, collectively redeeming themselves. Inside were mugs painted with everyone's initials and a note. "Family isn't about who sits at the big table. It's about who helps set it." We laughed so hard we cried. That evening, we had dinner by candlelight. Roasted duck, cranberry glaze, soft piano music playing in the background. The warmth in the room felt earned, fragile but alive. At the end of the meal, Mom stood up, glass in hand. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice trembling. "To Lydia, for showing us what strength and grace really look like. And to the rest of us, for finally learning how to listen." Dad raised his glass next. "I'm proud of you," he said, "not because of the money or the house, because you never gave up on yourself." I swallowed hard. "Thank you," I said, "for coming, for trying." 2 days later, when the taxi came to take them back to the airport, the goodbye at the front door felt different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't a scene. Just a quiet, warm exchange that said, "We'll do better this time." Victoria hugged me tightly. "Don't disappear again," she whispered. "I won't," I said, "but I won't shrink either." Mom cupped my face in her hands. "You don't have to," she said. Dad nodded. "See you soon, kiddo." I watched their car wind down the drive, the snow swallowing the tracks behind them until the world looked untouched again. That night, after they'd gone, Evan and I sat by the fireplace with glasses of wine. "Do you think they mean it?" he he asked. I think they're learning, I said. That's enough for now. He smiled. Grandma would approve. I laughed softly. She already texted me this morning, said, don't let them back in all the way yet. Make them knock first. A week later, life settled into a rhythm again. I spoke to Grandma twice a week. Victoria texted me memes and old photos of us as kids. Mom called every Sunday just to ask about the weather in Colorado. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Some evenings, I'd step out onto the deck, wrap myself in a blanket, and watch the sun melt behind the mountains. The same mountains that had witnessed my anger, my rebuilding, and now, my forgiveness. Maybe I'd never get the childhood I wanted, but I'd built the adulthood I needed. And as the wind whispered through the pines, I realized something Grandma had tried to tell me all along. You don't fix a broken family by waiting for an apology. You fix it by becoming whole yourself and letting them decide if they're ready to meet you there. I sipped my wine, smiled at the horizon, and whispered to the fading light, I'm home.